A real quick disclaimer before we start the video is that pretty much all of this footage is not owned by me. I will be giving credit to the origin that I got it from. Otherwise, there will be a few videos that I have taken myself, and I will be addressing which ones those are. You can look down in the far right corner. Otherwise, welcome to my top 50 coasters as updated by June 2018. This is the top 50 due to the fact that I've ridden exactly 50 roller coasters throughout my life. Now, since I live in Denmark and I have not traveled to places like the US, you will not be seeing big coasters as B&M hyper coasters or big Intamin rides due to the fact that I've not been to stuff like Six Flags or Cedar Point and so on. I'll quickly say that the first few in the video, the worst ones, are a bit boring. They're very small, but they just have to get over with, and otherwise I hope you enjoy the video. Starting off at top 50, we have Goldmine, which is an unknown powered coaster at a traveling carnival in Denmark going by Tivoli Land. This coaster, very shortly said, made me fear for breaking my bones in my left arm. There's not much footage of this, not much more than what you're seeing here, so I suggest we're just moving on to number 49. At number 49, we have a Wacky Worm or Pinfar Big Apple. This one was the traveling carnival in Denmark, Angus Tivoli. Now, I couldn't get any footage of this coaster, so you're just seeing footage of another Wacky Worm just like it. And due to it being a Wacky Worm, it is, of course, at the bottom of the list, and I suggest we're just moving on. At number 48, we have another Wacky Worm at Sommerland Sjælland, Denmark. This one going by Vilbassen. Again, this is another Wacky Worm, just having a bit more scenery and attractions around it, earning it its higher spot. And at number 47, we have another Wacky Worm Pinfari Big Apple, this one going by Carlos Taxi, and it is a defunct coaster taken down in 2014 at Gerstlauer, Denmark. Again, just due to the scenery, this earns a slightly higher spot. At number 46, we have another defunct coaster. This one only operated for 1 year when I tried it, 2008, and it's called Caninos and it was at BonBon-Land, Denmark. This creepy bunny rabbit was a small Sierra Tivoli model and was simply designed for small kids. At number 45, we have Marie Hernet Bakken, another Sierra Tivoli model with a stop on the lift hill designed for the children to wave at their parents. This is not a small kiddie coaster, but it is pretty decent. And at number 44, we have another Sierra Tivoli model in Tivoli Gardens, ironically, in Denmark. This one is a more intense one with a bit of airtime and rough turns, giving a bit of thrill, and is also closely encountered by scenery. Otherwise, it is a pretty decent kiddie coaster and definitely deserves a spot. As the last Sierra Tivoli model, we have Temperride at Legoland Billund, Denmark. This is also a defunct coaster closing in 2013, and this one earns the spot as the best one due to its scenery and theming. This one was also a bit of a thrill and actually had some great memories with myself when I was younger. Again, a small kiddie coaster and definitely worth the credit if you like small coasters. At number 42, we have Pindsvinen at Fluch von Novgorod, Denmark, being a small Semperla family gravity coaster. This one is pretty decent and is generally my ideal kiddie coaster due to it being very small but also having smooth track as well as a helix. The first big ride at number 41 is Kärnan at BonBon-Land, Denmark. This is a Gerstlauer spinning coaster, and the reason for it being this low on the list is simply because I'm not a fan of spinning coasters, to be honest. It features a small, wild mouse-like section as well as some pretty cool helixes, and it is a pretty good coaster. Only issue is I easily get nauseous, and this is why it's not any higher on the list. The same goes for our first entry at top 40, being Flagermusen or the Bat at Fluch von Novgorod, Denmark. This is a Reversion spinning wild mouse coaster featuring both non-spinning and spinning sections, and it has some pretty good drops, but as soon as it starts spinning, it is pretty easy for me to get nauseous, which is why it's not any higher on the list. But otherwise, I will give it credit for being a good coaster and slightly better than Kärnan in my own opinion, due to me being a little less nauseous by it. Breaking it at number 39, we have Onen Expressen at Tivoli Gardens, Denmark, this being a Mack-powered coaster. The reason I'm not a fan of this is because I think it's honestly a little rough, it's not too thrilling, and in the beginning, you slide and crush your side buddy if you're on the ride. Otherwise, it is still a memorable ride for me, and it doesn't deserve an any worse spot. At number 38, we have Racing, which is a Sierra Flitzer coaster at Bakken, Denmark. This is a pretty fun ride. It has no restraint, which makes it pretty fun, due to it still being somewhat safe in my opinion. I quite like this coaster, but the reason it's so low on the list is because it's also a bit uncomfortable. Your feet vibrate like crazy when riding this coaster, and frankly, that's just not me. At number 37, we have one of the weirder ones, Hundeprøverrutsjebane at BonBon-Land, Denmark, which is a small Sierra Force coaster and the first one in the park. This is themed to literally dog shit and features you riding with the dog Henry while undergoing his farts and poops and stuff. It's a little weird theming, but this is a nice addition to my childhood and brings nostalgia, so this is why it earns its spot. As the first international coaster on our list, we have Tour Kärnan, Italy. This looks like a waggy worm and does feature the same kind of trains, but is a longer, smoother variant with several lift hills and helixes. This one is a great transfer for small kids to move from stuff like, well, normal waggy worms to slightly bigger coasters and want to get into more thrills and area-based coasters. It's a pretty good ride and you do have fun of it, and it's actually pretty great for recording, as I did myself. Unfortunately, I just didn't get to show it. Next up, we have Villemus at Bakken, Denmark. This is a Mack Wild Mouse coaster, a pretty standard Wild Mouse with the lateral G's at the top and tight turns and dips. And frankly, I am a fan of Wild Mouse coasters. I'm not quite sure what it is, but there is something about them, and I just kind of like this coaster and always looking forward to riding it. It's a nice little ride, and I give it its credit. Coming in, we have a Mauer Wild Mouse coaster as well. This one is called Wildmine and is located at Hansa Park, Germany. The reason for this one spot is because it has great scenery as well as animatronics, and it definitely gives a more interesting ride, and it's also a little more intense. The queue itself is pretty interesting too, having you down in mines, and when you get into the ride itself, you also go in and out of buildings in dips and through canyons. I quite like this coaster, and I'm always looking forward to a nice themed ride like this. At number 33, we have Tornado at Bakken. This is an intimate spinning coaster and is one of the most intense coasters I have ever ridden. Of course, it is a spinning coaster, so it can get you a bit nauseous. It's actually the coaster I've ridden with the most G-forces, coming in at 5G. And yes, that's a spinning coaster. Probably the most interesting part about it is its lift hill, which is a double chain lift hill with a launch. The only bad thing about this coaster is when you reach the top, the really uncomfortable restraint system smash up your neck, and that's why it's not getting any higher spot. It is uncomfortable. At number 32, we have Victor Van at BonBon-Land, Denmark. This is a very long Sierra Tivoli model, going through the water and very long turns and dips. As a family coaster, this is pretty good transfer into bigger coasters, and as of 2017, this ride also earned itself some Samsung, not sponsored, VR headsets, renaming it to Hemmelige Verden. Number 31, we have Dragon, also the Dragon, at Legoland Billund, Denmark. Just like any Legoland, the first one in the world, being Legoland Billund in Denmark, has a dragon coaster. However, this one is different than all the others. All the others are usually Sierra Force models, but this one is actually a Mack powered coaster. It's a pretty good one, and always starts off with theming through the castle, seeing all the different Lego figures do their job. Otherwise, the thrill itself outside is a little underwhelming and could get better. Coming in at top 30, we have the best spinning coaster I have ever tried in Gerstlauer, Italy. This is Kung Fu Panda Master, and it is a Fabri spinning wild mouse. Consisting of a weird lift hill, this spinning wild mouse features of course the normal hairpin turns as well as small dips and actually pretty good airtime and thrilling moments. It is not to be underestimated. It is actually pretty fun for the whole family and earns its spot at number 30. At number 29, we have one of the better family coasters I have ever ridden. This one is Fluch von Novgorod at Hansa Park, Germany, and is themed to the northern gods of the Vikings, Odin, Thor, and so on, where the ride itself is meant to replicate the Midgard worm. This ride is pretty good and actually has some pretty decent layout, as well as great theming where you meet Odin himself and go into the dark on the lift hill. This ride in general is a pretty good coaster and is a must ride if you're into the park. At number 28 we have a Woody Rutsjebane at Bakken, Denmark. This is a very old coaster dating back to 1938, even though it did recently get some new trains. This coaster isn't very big, but does hit a decent speed at 75 kilometers an hour. What you're seeing here is actually my personal footage that I got of me and my sister riding a ride, and even though it is very rough and the double down that you're seeing right now can actually be extremely uncomfortable, the ride is still pretty fun and does feature some interesting, yeah. At number 27 we have Pole Explorer Legoland Billund, Denmark. This is a Sierra Elevate seating coaster, which is a bit weird. It is a pretty good family coaster with a short layout, but what's interesting about it is that it has a drop track section. Supposedly this does drop you 5 meters, but it's a bit skeptic and doesn't feel quite like it. Otherwise this is pretty good theme, and it actually ends off with you meeting penguins, so definitely earns its spot. At number 26 we have Roland at Hansa Park, Germany. This is a Vekoma Junior train coaster, and it's a pretty decent thrilling family ride that goes into nice speeds, as well as going through a loop of a coaster we will talk about later in this video. It is a pretty decent coaster. It is definitely possible to have fun on it, but it does to go a bit slow in the end, and that is why it's not any higher on the list. Top 25 starts off with a Mag extended Wild Mouse-like coaster. This is at Legoland Billund, Denmark, and it's called Extreme Racers. While it looks like a Gerstlauer bobsled coaster, I promise it is not. It is in fact a Wild Mouse coaster with its hairpin turns, drops, and a much longer layout, as well as some turning drop. If you take a Wild Mouse and just extend it and make it a lot better, this is generally what you get, and I always enjoy this ride and look forward to it, even though it might not be that thrilling. Otherwise, it definitely earns its spot. And by the way, I love the themed cars. Number 24, we have another Vekoma Junior coaster, this one being Mini Expressen at Forup Sommerland. It is much more thrilling than Roland and therefore earns its spot, and also you're in for a surprise if you're riding it for the first time due to you not actually being able to see the layout from the outside. This actually got me fearing a little bit for the first time I rode it when I was a kid, and trust me, it is actually pretty worth it. Pretty good ride for the whole family. At 23, we have BonBon at Hansa Park, Germany. This is a Mag bobsled coaster, and it's the only bobsled coaster I've ever ridden. I will say, however, from what I know, this is a pretty good one, and it definitely gets the thrills. It vibrates a little in the feet, but otherwise it's pretty fun, and you definitely want to give this one a ride if you come here. Only bad thing about it as a bobsled coaster though is the fact that in the end you hit a lift hill and think, oh, we're going up to right down again. But it's actually just a long ass lift hill into the station. Otherwise, very nice ride. Number 22 is our first coaster with an inversion. This is Nessie Super Roller Coaster at Hansa Park, Germany, and it's an old Schwur looping coaster. It has a long layout with drops and helixes, but its most interesting part is the one vertical loop it does around the coaster we talked about before, Roland. This ride is a bit rough, but it's definitely fun due to its lap bars, and you will not regret riding this. Only bad thing about it is at the end you go into a tunnel and it kills your ears. Alright, so at number 21 we have a controversial coaster. This is an SLC at Hansa Park, Germany called Limit. Let me just say, these coasters are known for being extremely rough and uncomfortable and therefore shit coasters, but I will say I do like the inversions and I do like the layout. I agree they are quite rough, but I am able to deal with it and still enjoy the coaster, and therefore it earns its spot. The same goes for the first addition to top 20 being Blue Tornado at Gardaland, Italy, being another Vekoma SLC. This one is slightly better because it is a little less rough. It has a way better color scheme. I still really do enjoy the inversions, and it also goes a bit over water and into some fog, as well as having the best addition, a bonus helix at the end. Pretty good ride, of course still rough, but not headachy rough. Number 19 is Thor's Hammer at Gerstlauer, Denmark. This one is a Gerstlauer bobsled coaster, the first kind of coaster Gerstlauer made as a matter of fact, and it's generally like a Wild Mouse coaster, but with great helixes. The hairpin turns are great, and it has extremely good airtime hills as a matter of fact, and always gives you a thrill in the stomach. This coaster is pretty good and also features great near water moments at the end. Definitely worth the ride. At number 18 we have Mine Train Ulven back in Denmark. This model is literally called the Intamin Family Ulven, and it's generally like a good mine train, but actually has extremely thrilling near-miss elements, and the first drop is also extremely steep with a real good head chopper. This coaster is generally really good and also shows off some pretty good Patriot shit. At 17 we have Vildsvinet at BonBon-Land, Denmark, with its questioning theming. This is the world's first Gerstlauer Eurofighter coaster, making it a prototype. It features only one inversion, a vertical loop, as well as some helix, an overbank turn, and a slight airtime at the end. It's pretty short, but it's pretty good, pretty fun, and I always love the drop of a Eurofighter. By the way, this is the only Eurofighter I've ever ridden. At number 16 we have Skatteøen at Gerstlauer, Denmark. This may look like a normal water ride and not a coaster, but it is actually a Mack Rides water coaster, featuring big helixes as well as a few drops. The helixes themselves are pretty fun, and in fact the drops can be quite thrilling and give some good forces, and in the end you enter the big splash. Also in the beginning it features some pretty great theming that is worth noting. Coming in at top 15 we have Rutsjebanen in Tivoli Gardens, Denmark. This is the third oldest coaster in the world and is also in my local park. It was built in 1914 and is therefore 104 years old. And surprisingly enough, you can actually get a pretty big thrill out of this, and it also has some great theming with mountains, some pretty good turns, and it's actually pretty stable for a 104-year-old ride. Also, it's so old that it has a brakeman on it that needs to brake the train for you. And sometimes, if the crew recognizes you and the fact that you like the coaster, they will try to give you a ride without any brake. Coming in at number 14, we have Kärnan at Fluch von Novgorod, Denmark. This is a Vekoma suspended family coaster and is doubtably a family ride. It is pretty good and definitely takes the kids into new experiences, but it also has a pretty big drop and a beyond overbank turn. Otherwise, it's filled with great helixes. It goes into a fog tunnel beneath the water, also goes over the water, and has some pretty decent theming, and it is a really good family coaster. Number 13 is Kärnan at Hansa Park, Germany. This is the first B&M coaster of the list and is a dive machine. However, it is an extremely short one. It is beamed to a kraken. It starts off with a normal dive machine drop into a kraken, then it does an immelman like most. It crosses into an airtime hill, but after that it already ends in the brake run, and that's the ride done. Topping it off, at number 12 we have Demonen at Tivoli Gardens, Denmark. This is the only B&M coaster in all of my home country, Denmark, and it is a floorless one, also the only floorless coaster I've tried. It is also one of the smallest B&M coasters in the world, but it is fun. It features a vertical loop, an inland loop, a 0G roll, and actually pretty good theming. It's also often used by Tivoli Gardens feature promotions, as you can see here, and also recently got a VR treatment. It is a pretty good coaster right in the city of Copenhagen. At number 11 we have Desert Race at Hansa Park, Germany. This is an Intamin accelerator, a smaller one with a pretty decent layout where it goes a little up and down into some turns and twists. However, the great part about the ride is the launch. It goes from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in about 2.4 seconds and is the fastest launch I have ever felt in my life. However, it is quickly over and the rest of the layout isn't too thrilling, but otherwise it is still a pretty good coaster. Now we have reached the top 10, and starting off with an SNS Woody. This is Falcon at Fluch von Novgorod, Denmark, and it's a newer, pretty fast-paced wooden coaster. It features great drops and twists and turns, as well as some pretty decent floater air. The coaster is definitely not to be underestimated, and can, even for the weak souls, be seen as quite intense. At number 9 we have Lunet at Fluch von Novgorod, Denmark. This is one of two Gerstlauer launch coasters in the world and features a launch from 0 to 80 kilometers an hour in 2 seconds after a small pre-drop. Otherwise, it has great ejector air times as well as 2 corkscrews that definitely give some thrills. The airtime hills are absolutely amazing, and even the small helixes definitely bring some joy. At number 8, we have Juveland and Gerstlauer, Denmark. This is an intimate family launch Juveland coaster, and it's the world's only until this very year, where I do believe there is no other one opened. This coaster is a double launch coaster with really sharp turns, some decent airtime. This coaster is themed to ATVs running through the jungle, and it's one of the best family coasters I ever tried. Even though this is a family coaster, it gives an amazing thrill, and also has some really good theming in the beginning where it's in like a temple, and it has some sort of sequence before it's open. Both launches are driven by like drive wheels, but they're actually pretty intense, especially the second launch, which is so intense that you almost lose grip of the handles you're holding on to. This coaster is simply one of the most fun coasters I've ever tried, but still comes in at number 8, with the following being Big Loop in Hansa Park as number 7. I have a weakness for old Vekoma Mark 12 coasters. Some people say they're rough, but the ones I've tried I've gotten new trains, making them not head-bangy and giving you a headache. I love this coaster, the helix, the loops, the corkscrews. I even gray out when I do the 2 loops, which is always fun, and I just love how it feels and the old feeling it gets. In fact, it was the first coaster that ever went upside down that my dad tried, and it's also the most photogenic coaster I have ever seen with the 2 corkscrews. At number 6, we have Mahmoud at Gerstlauer, Italy. This is by far the best family coaster I have ever been on. It may not be the most intense one, and it is in fact an old Vekoma mine train, but its theming is beyond perfect in my opinion. It is absolutely great, and it even features an entire 3 lift hills. It's just a good coaster, and I generally just love this ride. Starting out the top 5, we have another old Vekoma Mark 12, this one being Shaman at Gerstlauer, Italy, and has a beautiful green paint job. This one is slightly better than Big Loop due to its surroundings, and its layout is a little bit better. It also just looks better and goes around the Sequoia Adventure SNS Screaming Squirrel coaster, which I unfortunately didn't get to try due to it being shut down the day I was there. It is a great coaster, and just like Big Loop, I gray out when I go through the loops. I also love the end part where it goes through the water, and in fact, before it was this coaster, it was called Magic Mountain and had a lighter paint job. No, not that Magic Mountain. But then in 2017, it got VR headset and a new paint job and name. Great coaster. At number 4, we have Raptor at Gerstlauer, Italy. This is the world's first B&M wing coaster, and I love this ride. Let me just start out by saying that. The theming is absolutely astonishing, and it has a great first overbank turn, followed by 3 lift turning rolls, being 0G rolls, corkscrews, and inline twist, and so on. This coaster definitely gives you a thrill, and the first time I tried it, I was in the back row, and the first time you just get pulled. It also goes over the water extremely smoothly, and is very close to the ground most of the time. It has great head choppers, and the last inline twist, in fact, has a total of 4. This coaster is one of the best I've tried. Obviously, the 4th best I've ever tried. I will always look forward to it when I come to Lake Garda in the future, and let's move on to the top 3. At number 3, we have another coaster from Gerstlauer, Oblivion the Black Hole. This is another B&M dive machine, and is in fact very similar to Kake at Hansa Park, Germany. The difference is that first of all, this one looks better. It also has way more intense theming, as well as a longer layout with an extra inversion and helix. The extra inversion being a 0G roll, and the helix being a bit forceful. I love this coaster, and it's themed to space, and after the first drop you also go straight down into what is called a black hole, with some great theming with all sorts of things being pulled into it. Absolutely great ride. Best Italian coaster I have tried. The second best coaster I've ever tried is Colossus at Hansa Park, Germany. Now this coaster has been closed down during the 2016 and 2017 and as well as 2018 seasons due to it being retracked a little, but let me just say, I was there in 2015 and it is the greatest wooden coaster and non-inverting coaster I have tried. This coaster is just super intense. The airtime hills are great. You get an insane thrill, and the only thing it's missing is more theming. If it had more theming and scenery and stuff, it would definitely be at number 1, and it was really tough for me picking this or either number 1 or number 2. But let me just say, it is so good. It's gonna take a lot in the future to beat it. Finally, at number 1, we have Fluch der Dämonen at Hansa Park, Germany. Translating into Flight of the Demons, we have a B&M wing coaster. This one is so great, and what makes it better than Raptor is the fact that it first off has more inversion. It starts out with a dive drop, then it has some great airtime hill, then it does an Immelman, it does either CG roll or corkscrew, I honestly don't remember, but it also has the unique demonic knot, which is kind of like a fall-off of an inclined Immelman loop and an inclined dive loop. It's a little bit confusing, but let me just say it's absolutely amazing, this coaster. I love it. I am a big fan of inversions, and this one just took it to the next level. It is forceful, it is fun, it is full of great elements. I just love this coaster. Just Colossus was very close to beating this for me, but it didn't quite do it. This one took the spot and is my favorite coaster I've ever tried. Now, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you made it all the way through, I'd like to thank you for watching. Also, I will say that here at the end of the month, in fact on July 25th when I turn 18, I'm going to Hansa Park once again. Last time I was at Hansa Park, I didn't get to try the Eurofighter they had there, and they didn't have the new big Schwur Kärnan as they have now, which I'm looking very much forward to. This coaster will beat my record for tallest and fastest coaster, and I will not be surprised if this coaster will take the spot for my favorite coaster. But we will have to see. Maybe I'll make a new list when I make the number 100 coaster. We'll see. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day.